for further insight on the situation regarding the war on Gaza. We're now joined by Don DeBar, activist and commentator, joining us from Austin, New York. And we also have journalist and political commentator Said Mohsen Abbas, who's with us from the British capital, London. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Don DeBar, if innocent women and children are dying, what good is the United Nations if it can't even implement a humanitarian ceasefire and to open a humanitarian corridor, at least to get aid into Gaza?
Well, the United Nations was conceived of as basically an international organization, a body, not exactly a world government, but a place that would put some international controls over the use of military force, essentially outlawing military force unless it's utilized through the Security Council, and a Security Council that has takes policy, at least from a General Assembly, in which every country in the world, or most of them, 193 of them at the moment, are represented. The architecture of it is a product of World War II. The victors in World War II, with the U.S., France, the U.K., China, and Russia, the successor to the Soviet Union. The veto power that exists among those five permanent members of the Security Council, and there are 10 that rotate in alternate years. I forget if it's 3 years, whatever it is. One group this year, another group the next term. They vote. 15 of them. Any one of the five can block action by the Security Council, meaning that intervening in a military conflict is being blocked, and there's really no other architecture to utilize in order to stop it. The United States has been the primary aggressor on the global stage since well before World War II, but certainly since World War II and since 1991, when it had no competing rival militarily in the geostrategic sphere. It's been basically unbridled and Wild West actor. It is the only thing that we have to work with, and the General Assembly has been taking up the mantle to try to do something about this. But the real problem is that the United States spends as much money on its military as the next 11 countries in the world, including all of the others that they complain about and some of their allies. And there's no countervailing military force that can stop them without risking nuclear war. And it's the United States, the only country that's ever used nuclear weapons against anyone. So there's an international order that's shaping around, the necessity to contain this power and to reverse some of the damage that's been done by the imperialism of the United States and its European ancestors or parents. It's gathering slowly, but it has to be navigated very carefully. An direct intervention, for example, right now might provoke a wider war, which might provoke a global conflagration, which might provoke nuclear war. And so I don't know what the solution is, but I do know the people of the world looking at this have to say that they can't tolerate it. You're looking at the Israeli military with the backing of the United States and the direction of the United States in a lot of ways, trying to exterminate a people. There's no other word for it. If you were an exterminator dealing with colonies of some infestation or another, which is the way that the Israelis look at the people who live, the Palestinians in Palestine, the exact mechanical process that they would go through is what's being done here. They're looking to kill the children, and they're doing it so that they don't reproduce. They're confining them with a particular space, and then they're killing everything that moves inside that space. That's an extermination. That's supposed to be illegal by every moral and state and government regulation and law on the planet, and going back thousands of years, and it's happening in front of the whole world, and most people are sitting on their hands watching it.
Said Mohsen Abbas, weigh in on the issue, please, for us. How many more innocent Palestinians have to be murdered in order for the international community to say enough is enough?
Well, the figures are absolutely, frightening. They're absolutely heartbreaking. 7,326 civilians have been killed in this indiscriminate bombing, carpet bombing. 3,038 at the last count were children, but of course it's happening again as we speak. There's a huge bombing exercise for land and sea and air going on, and of course that number is growing rapidly. 1,709 women I found, 8,967 injured. This, what, in the space of around 20 days? I mean, it really is. It is kind of, there are figures that will turn into biblical numbers if they carry on at this rate. If you extend this war a year and they continue this kind of performance, then really it is a genocide. It already is, and it's certainly heading that way. And they haven't spared the UN staff. 57 UN staff members have been murdered. 12 hospitals are out of service. They bombed 22 hospitals, and even 32 journalists. I saw one of the major news channels from the Middle East, whose journalist was burying his wife and his kids. And this is just now a tale which is obviously clear. Added to this, the complete cutoff of electricity now, and the fuel issues, and the lack of clean water. What you're witnessing here is something really just akin to everything that the West used to drone on about Hitler, and they used to talk about Nazis, and they used to, and we none of us can actually forget the reality is that Dresden was something which the Western Allies did. They carpet bombed and flattened Dresden. What they did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, if you look at the pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the way the buildings are left, and then you compare pictures today with Gaza, there are large areas of Gaza now which are exactly like that. 42% of the buildings are no longer livable, according to the UN. That's how much destruction has happened. You see, how does it stop? Well, the reality is there should be no excuse given to Israel. Yet what we're seeing is an Anglo-Zionist empire hell-bent on supporting Israel to the hilt, and it's shocking the level of barbarity, the depths to which these politicians have fallen, the behavior of the Western media with its ongoing censorship, with its kind of deplatforming of people, its cancel culture. They're using all sorts of ways, even on social media, of limiting the amount of outcry, but that's not being responded to. The reality is that the crimes are so obvious now, and have so captivated the audience's kind of disgust and their imagination, that 76% of people in the YouGov poll just yesterday said that the British public, 76% of it, wants a ceasefire. They want a cessation of this bombing. Even in America, where you get such a kind of such a propaganda, and literally Israeli Hasbara being churned out by every news anchor, left, right, and center. Even there, 66% of the American public has cottoned on to the fact that this is a genocide, and they're saying stop it now. The reality is that the people don't have the power, and the politicians answer not to the people in the so-called democratic systems of the West. Rather, they answer to corporate power, to institutional money mafias that exist there, and what they describe as their economic interests of their state, or their security interests. Those are the two words which justify killing children, murdering and maiming anybody as and when they please. I mean, it's the end, to be honest, can only happen, I think now, number one, if the resistance actually surrenders or gives up, which is not going to happen. That I cannot see. We've had proposals to say, okay, look, if you give us 6,000 of the Palestinian prisoners, we'll give back the hostages, and that may stave off the bombing, perhaps. But in reality, what you've got is a mindset in the Israeli establishment and across a wide proportion of the Israeli population, where they are literally fascists. They are Zionist, ultra-extremist people who are putting out in public, on Twitter, on TikTok, hate crimes, and literally dehumanizing Palestinians, literally saying, even their ministers, the former, I think, foreign minister or ambassador, he went on Sky and he was unchallenged by the journalist, and he said, I don't know why people are trying to stand up for these Palestinians. They're not human, they're animals, essentially. That's how they see them, and it's actually inculcated also, unfortunately, within the Zionist Jewish interpretation of their religion, and it's now become a religious reality for them that they must just kill and wipe out and destroy Gaza. Unfortunately, we're dealing with a genocidal bunch of maniacs, and behind them, people like of course, Biden and Sunak and all the cohort, they are no different. And they are just literally killers in suits and dripping with blood. And when I see their images, I don't see men in suits speaking, the language of peace. I see just killers and murderers who have children's blood on their hands.
Don DeBar, this is a notion echoed by many officials, many Iranian officials as well, that the United States is basically complicit in these war crimes that are being committed against Palestinians in Gaza. Do you agree with that notion?
I think the word complicit is not accurate. I think it's that they're much more deeply involved than that. Some of the weaponry being used to murder children and others in Gaza requires the active participation of the people who hold the key here in the U.S. military. AWACS and some of the other things, the more elaborate targeting things, access to satellite data, all kinds of, signal intelligence materials. The United States doesn't give anyone else the keys to that. And those things are obviously being employed in the bombing raids and in the intelligence and the assassinations and the shootings of civilians. John Kirby, the spokesperson, where's he? The Pentagon now? I don't know, he's been state and the White House, wherever. Day before yesterday, saying specifically, look, this is war. It's messy. Civilians are going to be killed. I regret to say it. Children are going to be killed. It's bad. It makes me feel very bad. But, and he had a but on a whole bunch of reasons why it's going to happen anyway. And he knows, like I know from knowing what their policy is, but he knows from working at the Pentagon and from being in the military that the United States is actively involved in doing this. So the problem is that, the same kind of problem you had in Chicago in the 1920s or whatever, it's against the law to do this, that, or the other thing. But when those who have the power to enforce the law are on the side of the criminals, then no matter what the law is, the criminals have free rein and they're going to do what they do. We're looking at, a level of impunity that has not been seen on the face of this planet in its entire history. The United States military and the people who make policy for the U.S. government and employ the military as their private army, they have no constraint on their power whatsoever, with the exception of the latent potential of human beings to overthrow the governments that are responsible for this and to put this right. Now, I think we're going to start seeing that. When they started the war in Ukraine, we started to see people go into the streets in Europe because those people had already been exposed to almost 50 years of austerity, and they started to feel right away the effects of that war. And they haven't yet been drawn into it physically, where Berlin hasn't been bombed, or Rome, or Madrid, or any of those places. But as that war widens, those places are going to be involved, and perhaps even the continental United States. In the Middle East right now, people in places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, the actual people, the population, they're looking at this and asking themselves, why is our government, in Saudi Arabia, for example, a government that up until last year had a larger military budget than Russia, why are they not intervening, restraining, and perhaps even doing away with this Zionist state and return status quo ante, where you had a democracy there where everyone participated? If there's going to be a point when their government doesn't act and this emergency keeps growing because these people are unrestrained on the ground in Israel, and the people themselves are going to do something about it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't want to be the government there.
Okay, I'm going to have to jump in there. We're running short of time. One last question to Mr. Said Mohsen Abbas. Mr. Abbas, we've got maybe less than a minute. If you may tell us about the issue of accountability. There has to be consequences for the Israeli crimes that are being committed against the Palestinians in Gaza. How will we see that accountability, Mr. Abbas?
of course, in an ideal world, the ICJ, the International Criminal Court, all of these institutions should be presented with the evidence, what's gone on the ground. Obviously data can be collected, and the UN is out there, and all the independent bodies that sit there know perfectly well what's gone on. Detailed reports should be made, and a legal case should be obviously put into the system. I think Israel was being prosecuted already in the ICC, and they were making all sorts of funny noises. But of course, they've got the Americans to back them up to try to bully even the International Criminal Court into not doing anything. Not that the International Criminal Court would be that keen on doing it anyway, because all of these institutions are interlinked, whether it's the UN, the ICC, the ICJ, or the WHO, or the United States government. They're all ultimately part of one imperial, apparatus, and I think it doesn't take much for them to give a nod to make sure that these institutions become totally ineffective. Failing that, I think maybe new institutions should be emerging. Maybe the BRICS groups and the Eurasian Axis, which is rising, maybe they now need to start saying, well, what's the point of all these institutions if they're not going to do anything?
Okay.
And perhaps what we need is an alternative set of international bodies where we can pursue these kinds of criminal proceedings,
Right.
etc.
Thanks a lot, gentlemen. Journalist and political commentator Said Mohsen Abbas joining us from the British capital, London, and also thanks to activist and commentator Don DeBar joining us from Austin, New York.